back, everybody, to another episode of the Nonprofit Show. This is going to be a really exciting conversation because we're here with Katerina Manoff, founder and CEO of ENGin. Katerina, welcome. We're really interested to hear what you have to say today.
Thanks for having me.
You know, building a nonprofit from scratch. Wow, Wendy, we kind of all have been involved with this, but we don't often think about it until we're like down the path. And so this is really cool to hear this stuff up front, don't you think?
Absolutely, right from the beginning. We taught grassroots. Now we're like talking the seeds. This is awesome.
I love that. Wow, that should have been the title. Why didn't I call you before I created the title? Well, you know, we're really excited because our title sponsors are with us each and every day, and they're the ones that plant the seeds. Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting. Our friends at Third Sector Company are now Interim Executives Academy. And so I wanted to kind of highlight that because this is a new branding message for them. We also have Your Part-Time Controller and Fundraisers Friday. I'm Julia C. Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy, joined today by one of my all-time faves, Wendy F. Adams, CFRE, Cultivate for Good. Hey, friend, what are you up to these days?
It's been a tremendous Q1. And, you know, it's always great to be here. I did a thing. I started a podcast. Conversation. The Cultivate podcast is out. It's live between leaders who are out there getting it done. We're celebrating them in conversation and also building a place for the support of what they're doing in relational leadership. So I am having a blast.
Awesome. I'm really proud of you. This is not an easy lift. It's hard to do. But I'm thrilled you're out there serving our nonprofit sector in yet a different way. And we're really, really excited that you're doing this. You know, Katerina Manoff, when we learned about you as a founder and a CEO of ENGin, we knew we had to get you on the Nonprofit Show. You're doing something really, really interesting, and I'm going to say really tough. Talk to us about your work and what the ENGin program is.
Sure. So ENGin is a pioneering grassroots nonprofit that pairs Ukrainian English learners with English-speaking volunteers from all around the world for weekly video chat conversations. And in just that 1 hour a week, we have a big impact. So the volunteers are creating a safe and authentic space for their learners to break the language barrier, to discover a new culture, and receive academic and professional guidance. And also, often there's an emotional bond that develops and they become friends. And what's really cool is that the volunteers are benefiting at the same time, right? So they're also discovering a new culture, they're building cross-border relationships, they're improving their communication skills. So we're really nurturing mutually beneficial, equitable relationships that that benefit both sides. And we're trying to do this at a pretty big scale. So we've had 55,000 participants to date. But my dream is to one day reach 1 million participants because I think what's really cool is taking this one-on-one, very personalized dynamic and scaling it to reach a critical mass where we can see national transformation, right? A whole population of young Ukrainians who are English fluent, culturally connected, that can drive reconstruction and economic growth.
Okay, so I'm going to just jump in there because this is like really, I'm going to use the word profound. You are talking about a culture that is involved in a war that has been dragging on. Their infrastructure has been radically transformed. Are you just talking about Ukrainians that are, you know, in this war-torn country, or what does that look like? I mean, you used the word restoration. That's powerful in itself, and that's like a whole nother journey. Talk to us about what these lives are like.
Yeah, absolutely. So An interesting fact about ENGin is that we actually started a couple of years before Russia's full-scale invasion in 2020. And back then, there was already a gap between, if you look at where Ukraine was in sort of economic development versus a country like, I don't know, Norway or the Netherlands, right? So European peer countries. And I really wanted to help my native country catch up and really fulfill its potential as a European democracy. And then, unfortunately, right, the need abruptly grew even bigger when Russia invaded, and all of a sudden, it wasn't just about catching up; it was about sort of rebuilding. Um, I don't want to say from scratch, but rebuilding after a lot of damage that was done and continues to be done. Um, so we're really working with all Ukrainians everywhere. So those who are still in Ukraine and those who have had to leave because of the war. So that's something we had to pivot to serve people all around the world because many Ukrainians are refugees, and we do have students who have gone through some very difficult experiences in terms of losing their homes, losing family members. I mean, even on my team, so many people have brothers, fathers, boyfriends fighting right now. Um, and to me, it's really inspiring that despite all of this, there is this strong drive to continue to learn and develop, and it's almost like a way to fight back. People sometimes ask, like, "Is this really important?" You're talking, you're exchanging cultures, you're improving your English. Like, there's a war going on, and no, it's absolutely important. And that's what I hear from my people in Ukraine, that this is a way to resist, that you don't give up. It's not just about surviving, it's about thriving against the odds.
It's the definition of perseverance. I mean, that is it defined. Wow.
This is such a powerful conversation. And I think for anybody that thought, oh, we're going to talk about how to start a nonprofit,
Mm.
Wendy, I'm reminded you say something to me all the time, and that's like, what is your why? What is the power of your mission? Holy moly, I've got chills. This is it, talking with Katerina, isn't it?
And that's exactly it. And you took the words out of my mouth, because that is the engine. That's what's driving. It's the why. And Katerina, you said it really well. It's a win-win. The volunteers on the other side, they're just not giving, they're getting as well. And that mutual benefit, oh gosh, there's the game changer.
Yeah, I think this is one of my favorite things about ENGin, actually, because unfortunately, so often in the nonprofit sector, we have this sort of harmful victim savior dynamic, and it can be really hard to get away from that, right? So this is
Mhm.
something that I'm really trying to pave a way to show, well, there doesn't need to be necessarily this imbalance. You can connect people in a way that is very authentic and that benefits them both, and I think it honors the dignity of our beneficiaries, and it's also, it's good business, right? Because if people are both benefiting, then they stay in the program. Volunteers will
Mhm.
take on more students. They tell their friends, and trying to scale rapidly. It's really important, right? To make sure that that you're bringing value in that way. And people often ask me, like, how do you get people to volunteer? It's so many people just giving their time, and it's because they benefit too. Because I set it up in a way that they don't feel like they're
Mhm.
giving; they feel like they're getting.
It's riveting, and I love that you somehow figured this out early on, because
Yes.
I feel that this is an idea that you're navigating oftentimes down that path, that you
Mhm.
don't ever even think about this, because you're worried about growing and you're trying to do all these things. So I'm fascinated that you've been able to figure this out.
Thank you. Yeah, it's, what's one thing when I think about how rapidly we've grown and what we've built, it
Mhm.
really is, I think, just a question of jumping in. And there's a lot of, whether you're starting a nonprofit or a for-profit business, right? The traditional way is you write a plan, you think about it for a long time. You have this 60-page document of exactly how it's going to go. And
Yeah.
for me with ENGin, I really just started very small and just started doing it, starting pairing people at a scale of, you know, ones, dozens, and then all of a sudden it was hundreds and thousands. And honestly, if I had written a plan, I'd have had to rip it up, right? Like no one knew that in February 2022 the entire world would change. So,
Yeah.
so I think, yeah, just staying very flexible and pivoting and not, realizing that we don't know the future. So let's just kind of like learn from what's happening and get a lot of feedback. That's the other thing, right? Just doing it and getting a lot of feedback from participants and sort of building on that.
Mm.
And as a leader, you are staying open to that. You have people around your table who are speaking in, right? You're not saying you have all the answers. So we know you're hitting a lot of really strategic 101 philanthropy concepts that, again, that we are going to learn how to start because she's walking it out. We're walking it out live in front of us. And that is riveting. I couldn't agree with you more, Julia. Just, I feel it. I feel it in my spirit.
Yeah, yeah. It's really an interesting thing. You know, I want to move on to this interesting aspect. I mean, you're talking about a global pandemic. You're talking about a major war that has global implications. It's not just a skirmish. There's a lot of national voices at play, and yet you come up with this idea that has no geographic base. It has a language base. Talk to
Mhm.
us about that. Wendy and I are very interested in this concept.
Yeah, this is another thing that, I think is pretty unique about ENGin is that by design, it is completely online and there's no home base, right? Like people often ask, where are you based? And I don't know what to say because we're like everywhere and nowhere. We all work online from our homes. I personally have moved, I think, 4 times since I launched ENGin 5 years ago. And I think it's really a strength. We started ENGin, just before the pandemic, so that happened very shortly after. And so, it didn't go online in response to the pandemic. It was sort of designed that way because the mission is connecting people, right, globally via video chat. So there's really no need for a physical place.
Mhm.
So I think having built it that way really let us adapt to big global events like the pandemic, and then a couple years later, the war, which required a lot of people, our team members, our students, to move around. And so having that flexibility has been huge. And another thing I wanted to highlight, as a small nonprofit, that we've really benefited from having the flexibility to hire the best people wherever they may be.
Mm.
Which, when you're small and you're cash
Yeah.
constrained and you can't pay as much as like a large multinational corporation, you want to, you want to offer people the flexibility of working from home, and you want to reach the best talent everywhere. And I think that's really been transformational for us, for me as a leader, to be able to build a really strong team from the beginning. Um, because I wasn't limited to, hiring in a particular area and asking people to go into an office. So, yeah, I know it's not realistic for every nonprofit. Obviously, some missions are very much connected to a physical location, but I think there's a lot of room in the sector to explore. Does there need to be an office? Does there need to be a home base? Or is this something that we can lean into modern day technologies and do this fully online?
Well, you're talking about the strengths in that space, right? Like what do we need to do because that's a reality. Like you said, you don't have the constraints of someone has to live here for this to work. I have a question though. There's a lot of relational components to this. How do you make sure that your volunteers are staying connected? There's so many of them; they're all over. And I mean, those are the questions that are being asked in this virtual space. But you're completely in that space. What does that look like?
Yeah, honestly, it surprised me to find out how close people can get to each other without ever having met. I still remember the first time I was on the phone with a volunteer, just getting feedback, and she was talking about how her student had become like a son to her, and she started crying, and I started crying, and it was like this really emotional moment. And at the time, I thought, well, this is unusual. But then like it kept happening. We kept getting these stories where people our volunteers and students would refer to their conversation partners as one of my best friends, or like
Mm,
another daughter, or like this is like my American grandma, and then dozens and dozens of people started actually traveling to meet each other in person, which was not organized by us at all. Paying their own money, often to travel to Ukraine, even with the war going on. Our volunteers will go because they want to meet their conversation partner because they've gotten so close. So yeah, definitely, we haven't seen it be a barrier to relationships forming.
sounds like just the opposite of a barrier. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I want to get into, and this is maybe a little different than we had originally thought, but could you talk a little bit about the technological aspect of this?
Mm,
Because I mean, we take it for granted in the US that we can go anywhere and have, a flawless broadband experience. But you're talking about people that are in a war-torn country, perhaps, or they're in another part of the world where they've left their culture, as you mentioned, because of the war or just because of circumstances. How are you navigating this technological aspect?
mm.
I have been again like very pleasantly surprised. For Ukraine, um, it's a very tech forward country, and frankly, when I have team calls with my colleagues, almost all of whom are in Ukraine, like I'm the ones more likely to have a glitch on my Zoom, more than them. There is, I think there's a huge commitment to staying connected even with the constant tax on the power grid. We saw those issues get resolved very quickly, and students were also very dedicated. I mean, in the thick of it, when Russia was bombing so much that internet and power had to be off for many hours a day, you'd have students logging on at 1 or 2 a.m. when the power was on so they could do their session via video chat. Um, and with volunteers, we have volunteers from over 140 countries, so definitely not all in the U.S. And again, they make it work. I mean, I was just talking recently to a volunteer in Iran, who who logs on from her home. We have a bunch of volunteers in Kenya. That's one of our bigger countries, and they're just people all over. But yeah, they find a way to connect, and I think we're lucky to live in a time where people all around the world do have access to, whether it's Zoom or Google Meet or WhatsApp video chat. Um, it hasn't really been a big barrier, and we found ways to work around it. I think even when the war has temporarily interrupted service.
Amazing. Wendy, that's like the human spirit at its best in the nonprofit sector.
Absolutely. No, I mean, she's removed all excuses. Katerina, you have said that if it's to happen, it can happen, and it's the we, right? We go back to the mission, but it's your volunteers, it's those who want to connect, saying yes, we're going to make this happen, and bringing that forward. You're right, Julie. I mean, this is the part of the grassroots, and this is the watering of those seeds. I love it. Oh my gosh.
I'm really impressed. Let's move on to the next thing that we really want to talk to you, and that
Yeah.
is something that Wendy and I talk a lot about off camera and on camera too, our boards. How do you get this to work? How do you get your nonprofit board that works?
Yeah, I
And so
was
they don't
really
get in the
talk
way.
about this. Yeah, that's exactly. I was actually writing that in my notes. So you read my mind, Wendy. I think a lot of the guidance out there about boards is for more seasoned nonprofits. And I found that a little frustrating because when you're starting a nonprofit, you're building a board from scratch, right?
Mhm.
And so you go and you look at, do workshops, resources, right? You look online, and they paint this very idealistic picture of this like almost like fairy tale godmother board, right? They give you lots of money, they don't get in your way, they show up to all the meetings, and it's like that's great. But like I'm working with humans, who are nowhere like that. And what do I do? And one piece of advice you always get is to communicate expectations clearly, which 100%, I think that makes a lot of sense. But in my experience, right, when I would come out with these expectations of like, you have to share the fundraising responsibilities with me, um, you have to do this, you have to do that. Um, People would say, "Well, thank you for explaining it so clearly. I don't think it's a good fit for me." And then you're stuck with no board. So, my
Yeah.
my key, I think, to building a good board, and to be honest, like this is probably the hardest thing that I've gone through in my 5 years of running Engine, and we've had multiple iterations of the board, and I think we've finally gotten to a place where I'm thrilled with the team we've got, and And so we did figure it out, but it took a lot of trial and error. And I think what was key was kind of throwing out those unrealistic expectations from from all the books and workshops, and just kind of starting with where our organization was at, and where the people that had access to were at, and what would be realistic. And I can give an example in terms of fundraising, right? To ideally, I would love to have a board where everyone gives or gets $10,000 a year at least, let's say. All right. That is not the kind of people I had access to when I was building my board. So I started with, let's have an expectation that everybody contributes to whatever level they can. All right. So kind of trying to, be flexible and think about how do I build a foundation that I can then grow from, right? And right now I'm really lucky and grateful to have a number of board members who give at 5-figure amounts, and I'm so grateful. But I think it's because I didn't have the expectation. I just kind of started
Mhm.
with, with the basics of what we needed, and slowly evolved it from there. And I think also, the pressure that falls on both the nonprofit leader and the board when you come in with the high expectations creates a really difficult, maybe not very productive environment for working together, right? Because you are frustrated that they're not living up to it. They feel like they're not doing a good enough job. So I think really reframing that into an attitude of gratitude, attitude of curiosity about where they wanted to plug in, inspiration, inspiring them with our work, and really growing and working together without that pressure of saying, well, this is what a board has to be like. That really helped, and I only wish someone had told me this at the beginning, so I didn't spend the first
Yeah.
the first year or more saying, well, why does my board suck? Why aren't they doing it
Right.
like it says in the books?
Right. I appreciate your candor on that.
There's no doubt, but the key there is you were still clear. For those who said this is not for me, that's a better answer than for them to join, and then you're doing that uphill battle. As challenging as that was, what you did bring to the table, and this is in some of the books, champions. To build those champions, you do need to be clear. This is who we are. This is what we need, and that is what even your current board, those that are giving it, it's a meaningful gift. And so that's what you were clear on. You didn't say you don't have to give. You eventually got that very clear to them. It's got to be a meaningful gift to you because you are our board champ. You are the champion of this organization as a board member. So kudos for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a real balance, right? You want to sort of have those expectations and push them, but you don't want to go overboard. So it's yeah, and kind of meeting each person where they are, and where I know that someone's going to be really excited about giving me advice on XYZ, and they know it, and then they're going to get back to my emails, and someone else is going to be really busy, and I'm not going to get those email responses, and that's okay because they're going to help connect me to a grant that I get every year, through a connection of theirs. So yeah, just really seeing where people can contribute and appreciating them for that, while also having that sort of baseline for everyone. I mean, it's hard. It's hard, and it's not like a simple math equation. But I really think balancing that is it's a skill that you learn over time,
Yes.
and I know I've definitely grown a lot in it, and I think it's key, right? We can't. This is not something that we can outsource or avoid as a
Mhm.
nonprofit leader. So I'm very grateful for the experience I've had to work with board members, and kind of the patience they've had with me as I've learned how to manage a board.
Let's talk about that in our remaining moments with you, because you bring up something. I love your witness to evolution, and that you yourself as a leader have had to grow and observe and change. Let's talk about that. I always think of it, the Yenta role, but that role of matchmaker between donors and beneficiaries, stakeholders. You're kind of that wizard that's bringing everybody in and making connections. How has that looked for you? And as a leader, what should we be looking for as well?
Mhm. Yeah, this is another, I would say, major mistake that I made at the beginning, and then since then I've seen a lot of new nonprofit founders make a similar mistake. So I really love talking about this. If I can help one person even avoid making this mistake, it'll be worth it. Why do we get into this work, right? We're passionate about
Mhm.
a cause, about a population, about maybe some solution we've come up with, right? So we want to go and create some incredible life-changing program, right? And then all too often we look at fundraising as something that's, it's kind of unpleasant, non-core thing that we would ideally just outsource, like we might do with accounting. Accounting needs to happen, needs to be done well, but as the CEO, would I be doing accounting? No, I just get a really good accountant. Or, legal might be like that, or HR, but fundraising is not like that. And I don't think that, people necessarily realize that when getting into this work, because, so many times I've been mentoring or giving advice to someone, and they say, well, I have this amazing idea. I figured it out. I have partners. I have the program all designed. I have the people I would hire. So I've basically got it all, except I need the funding. And I'm like,
Mhm.
well, and you haven't really got anything, have you? Like, right? Imagine like if I was running a for-profit company and saying, well, I've got this amazing product, but I just haven't got like any investors to invest in or any customers to buy it. So then
Mhm.
not a very good product then. So for me, that mindset shift from just saying, well, I'm someone who's passionate about running this program, to saying, well, what I'm really excited about is figuring out who cares enough about this to fund it. And that's actually my core role as a CEO, is to figure out both sides of that equation, right? To figure out a need and a solution, and then to connect to people who are interested in funding that. Um, I think that's really been the key to ENGin's success.
Mhm.
And from the initial funding model, which was one seed investor who was really passionate about developing Ukrainian youth and about scalable initiatives, and I had here a scalable initiative for Ukrainian youth, so it was like a perfect match for his interests. So if I hadn't made that match, I wouldn't be here today. And then as that seed funding was drawn down, I had to build a new ongoing source of funding, which is primarily right now we're funded by donations and support from our volunteers, actually, as well as one-time fees from our students. Again, and that came from saying, well, who is benefiting from this? Who cares
Mhm.
about it enough to pay for it? And for a lot of sort of typical funding sources for us, it's not them. There's not necessarily foundations who are unfortunately funding this work. There's not interest in government, funding this work even before government funding kind of went haywire.
Mhm.
So being excited about sort of solving this problem and solving this equation, I think is key to success as a CEO. What I say now to people who say, "Well, I don't want to do this. I just want to run programs." It's like, well, maybe your ideal job then is a program director, right? That's out there, and that's perfectly fine. But if you want to run a nonprofit, I think you have to see the sort of that match between those who provide the resources and those who need the resources, making that match. That is your core role.
Because you're the chief storyteller, and that is what connects those that are wanting to give. And so you can't move
Yes.
yourself out of that space, right? And so you've just reframed. It's different language. It's the culture of philanthropy. You know all of these things, but that's what you great self-awareness to recognize that's a key component of being a CEO, is to be able
Mhm.
to give that passionate story and share it with those who are going to make the connections from a time, talent, and treasure standpoint. Wonderful.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So telling the story and telling it to the right people, right? Because I think we hear a lot about telling
Yes.
stories, right? But those stories have to get
Yes.
to the people, and then sort of figuring out where should the story be going, I think is so important. And yeah, definitely an important lesson for me.
Wow, I gotta say, devastated that our time is almost up. Wendy, this has
Mhm.
been one of the more interesting guests we've had on the nonprofit show in 6 years. Somebody that is,
Yes.
I mean, I'm literally riveted, Katrina, by your concept, your work. I really hope that the viewers that have watched us today or have visited us on a podcast format really go to ENGin, ENGIN program.org and learn more about this visionary leader, Katerina Manoff, founder and CEO of ENGin. You know, thank you for your service. Thank you for bringing out the better things that we have in us during a time when sometimes we don't get to see our better angels. I really, really appreciate this. You know, we need to get you back on as we follow the arc of your journey, Katerina. It's just such a great story. You know, I'm thinking about this in terms of other languages and other programs, and your formatting, I'm sure, could be replicated in other ways. And so really cool to have you be with us today. I'm just taken aback, Wendy. I'm like almost speechless.
Your fortitude is gosh, it's so inspiring, and there's no way that anyone interacting and engaging with what you shared today can say, well, we just can't. And so that's what I want to say thank you for, like the stretching that you've done. You've wrecked me today in a great way, and I so appreciate it.
Thank you both so much. I really appreciate it, and it's been really fun speaking with you both.
Well, it's really amazing. And you know, we are here today having this great conversation because we have the support of our presenting sponsors, just like those that are supporting, you know, Katerina and her work. And our sponsors include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Interim Executives Accounting, Your Part-Time Academy, excuse me, Your Part-Time Controller, and Fundraisers Friday. These are the folks that make a difference in so many lives. And wow, today has been transformational. Katerina and Wendy, we end each and every episode of the Nonprofit Show with this message. And today it really means something for our friends that are all over the world working in really tough environments, including economic uncertainty, war-torn nations, and certainly cultural upheaval. And the message is this: to stay well so you can do well. Thank you, ladies.